On today's podcast, I've got the pleasure of welcoming Bram, who is on Twitter as @BRAMK and who runs the Bitcoin for Millennials podcast. So thanks for being on, Bram.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for the invite. I'm happy to be here.
Where I usually start with guests is just to go back into their earliest memories of money. So before we go on to Bitcoin, in childhood, what were your earliest memories?
Wow, that's a great question. I think one of my earliest memories actually, and it's pretty late, I think, in childhood, but I think it was around kind of like my puberty. I think like 14, well, 15-ish. I've always been into like internet, like computers, figuring out like what are people doing on the internet, how can I use the internet, stuff like that. And then along the way, we were like very early in having internet in our home. So I think I was like 12 or 13 when I like really got online, which is like the 1999, something like that. And I remember at one point discovering Napster. I'll Google when the Napster launch was. Okay, June 1, 1999 is the Napster launch, right? I think I'm talking about like 2000, 2001. I was like a very early user actually of Napster. I later found out. And I was always just downloading music, turning the MP3 files into WAV files. And then I had like, these CD burners and CD stickers and CD cases. And I made my own mixtapes that I sold in school. And then from the proceeds, I held parties at a bar that the father of one of my friends owned. And I think if I think back about one of my earliest memories, I think it's more like one of the earliest memories of me making money with something that I was just messing around with, basically. And it was very interesting because through the internet, I also later discovered, when mobile phones launched, I was following like mobile phone news, and I just started buying mobile phones, but also like mobile phones from Japan that were like not available in my country. And then I just started trading phones. And I remember that eventually when I was like 15 or 16, I had like the gold Nokia with the antenna that you could like pull out. And I thought it was really cool. And so, yeah, I think those are like my first memories when I think about money in my childhood. So like doing stuff, figuring out like how to make money, which was different than I think before when I worked in a supermarket or had like a newspaper route that I.
Yeah, it's very entrepreneurial from a pretty young age then, whereas most people, their earlier memories are kind of pocket money or, as you say, kind of part-time jobs. So it's interesting that you go back to something that's really quite entrepreneurial. And were there people, family, friends, whatever, in your earlier years that influenced you around spending, saving, or kind of money habits?
No, none at all. I don't think I really learned about money, actually. I do think I was always quite diligent or prudent, like not spending on crazy stuff, like really thinking about, okay, what is it I want to buy? Later, I also really got into sneakers, for example. But no, not really like a real education on saving or like how to plan your money or something. I don't know. I think it's kind of like a natural part of me in a sense that like I'm a pretty risk averse person. So I think that's kind of like the reason that I never really was really reckless with money. I do remember that like at maybe 16 or something, I inherited from an aunt, from my father, like a little stock portfolio, which was at that time maybe like 1,000 euros or something. But I was like 17, 18 or something. And I remember just giving half to my mom, and I spent the other half on a 6-month trip in Australia, and then it was gone. And I think if I look back on those stocks now, that was probably like a very dumb decision. But at that time it was really great. So I don't know. I always felt, and I learned that is how I looked at money. And I think that's also what really helped me understand Bitcoin eventually, I think to a deeper level, is that I just always saw it as time, like having a certain amount of money, buying myself time, whether it was, a 6-month trip to Australia or a year at home with my son when he was born, like his first year home, I just spent at home. Yeah, I think there were different moments in my life where I used money to buy time to also enjoy that time, but at the same time figure out, okay, what is my next step, whether in my life or in my career.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that, because often when we're younger, we're cash poor and time rich, where we can potentially, we don't have the constraints of family and kids and everything else, or even a job really to hold down. But if you haven't got the money to go traveling when you're young and you want to do it, when you're older, you can't. You may have the money but not have the opportunity. So it's easy to think of that as wasted money as a teenager, but actually I'm sure it gave you a pretty good 6 months traveling and a sort of different aspect and outlook on your life.
Oh, that was amazing, and it was also actually in 2009 is when I went to Australia, and that was like in the wake of the great financial crisis. And so my idea was to travel for like, I don't know, a year or 2 years or something like that. I had this working visa, and my plan was to chill for a few months first, and then find like a job, make some money there, and then just stay for as long as I could. And at one point, when I didn't need the money, I actually used the money that I had to play poker. I won some, and then I had like another extra month, right? And so I kind of like extended the real working part. But at one point, I was really running out of money, and I wanted to work. But in the wake of this great financial crisis, there weren't any jobs in Australia. So I went to like sneaker stores because I liked sneakers. And I thought, well, if I just work for like 3 months here in the sneaker store, then I get, save some money, get out again. And in the next city, I'll do the same, something like that. And I remember going to a sneaker store and talking to the owner. And then he was like, yeah, like, okay, you know a lot about sneakers, but I have 230 applicants or something like that for this just simple just a store job. And he said, yeah, I'm going to prefer Aussies over backpackers. And I said, that's totally fair. And I had like 2 or 3 similar experiences with other places that I applied to. And then at one point, my money was just done, so I had to go back home. But that was all okay. But it's interesting, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Like, that's, to be honest, like my only real memory from like the great financial crisis era. Whereas later, looking at the fallout of that and what the impact has been on the financial system and learning about that, actually way bigger. That understanding is now way bigger than when I was actually living in the short time after the actual event.
On your Twitter profile, it says 25 plus failed entrepreneurial. So talk to me about that, how that panned out.
Yeah, so like I said, I was always really interested in like the internet, what's happening on the internet, what are people building on the internet. I just loved trying out new products that people were building. And I think later I realized what I actually found interesting, and it's just to see like, what are people spending their time on, right? So the concept of time, I think, combined with money that I just mentioned, is I think a recurring theme, but also. If you have an idea, why would you spend time on that? Like, how do you actually know if you should pursue a certain idea, right? Like how low can you take the uncertainty around the outcome of the idea before you really go for it, right? And I think that also connects to just me being a risk averse person, like trying to figure out like, okay, if I have an idea, right, like how do I figure out if this is something I should actually spend time on? And that always really fascinated me. That's also why I was a very early user to lots of tech products like Napster, for example. And so
with those that kind of volume then of attempts that you had, and certain and a large proportion of them not working out, was there an element of maybe if you were so risk averse, you maybe quit too soon on some things that with hindsight you think might have been more successful?
Oh, yes, definitely. But I think on the other hand, so what I really liked eventually is just, I always had this entrepreneurial tendency that combined with, computer skills or internet skills. I don't know how to call it. I think it's more like information processing skills, actually, if I think about it, kind of like seeing opportunities, having the possibility to have an edge. Like, I tried many ideas, and I think they all failed in different stages. Some earlier than maybe necessary, but I later kind of like came to the realization that it doesn't really matter how far you take an idea, even afterwards. If you think like, oh, I should have taken that further, like, just closing one idea opens up a door for other ideas, or you learn something. I always felt like if you learn 1 or 2 things from a failed idea, that's great, because that really compounds to like the next one. And so Yeah, my bio says 25 plus failed ideas, and along the way I sold like 5 things that I created, and so I think my hit rate is actually pretty okay.
Yeah, for sure.
And so yeah, I do really think the learnings really compound over time, and I mean the ideas ranged from an oyster import business to clothing to, well, digital business ideas to, I don't know, investment funds, whatever. Like it just all over the place. Yeah.
And were most of those where you spotted an opportunity, or how much of it was you following an interest and a passion?
I'd say 90% just interest or passion, just like where I was focusing on at that time or spending my time on, and just thinking like, hey, I would love to do something with this topic or this market. And I think, that eventually also ties into Bitcoin. I do think I'm just a classic internet geek that loves to go down rabbit holes.
How did that happen for you then? What was your Bitcoin story?
So I had a friend who sent me a video, something called like Bitcoin Explained. It's on Vimeo, but unfortunately it's private now, so you cannot I cannot link to it. In I think early 2014, and I watched that video. It's just a really factual video that explained how Bitcoin works, and I remember that the thoughts I had around it back then were like, okay, this is a currency for the internet, which makes a lot of sense. And so I always kind of looked at it like that. And in the beginning, it was just really money driven because I was a student, and I thought like, okay, this is something to make money with. And of course you had like Silk Road and stuff like that. So it's just really interesting, weird internet money thing. And so I always share this, like I bought between 100 and 300. When I even look up my old tweets from 2013, it says, I say something like, Bitcoin is a synthesized commodity that you can trade 24/7, 365. And like, if I read that now, I'm like, damn, you idiot, like you got it. But I didn't get it, so I sold everything at 4,000. I got distracted by all the crypto attempts. Litecoin is Bitcoin 2.0. I even had like a presentation at a big bank. After a guy had a presentation on Bitcoin, I did a presentation on Litecoin, and then like along the way, I found Ethereum, of course, decentralized supercomputer of the internet. I was like, wow, that's even cooler. So I think I got into Ethereum at like $7 or something like that. One of the startups I sold was actually for Ethereum. And so, I just, I got distracted because I just like messing around with new things. And so I like technology, which I think for my generation or our generation, like is just kind of a natural thing. Later, so I did pay attention to Bitcoin along the way. I held Bitcoin. I looked at it. I tried to really understand it. And I think in 2017, I actually worked at that big bank where I held that presentation 5 years before. I walked in daily with my backpack with my Bitcoin pin on in like the financial district of Amsterdam, and I always felt like I was like an intruder, And that was really in like the ICO age, and so I was betting on like multiple like neo banks and whatever not, whatever we funded, on the floors of that bank building, and it was actually a conversation with a colleague that worked at that bank that made me realize that I had no clue about the financial system. So we had a conversation one day and he told me like, did you know that the money in the bank is not yours? And I was just like, well, what are you talking about? And it was when we were having lunch. So we had like a conversation for an hour and he explained like fractional reserve banking to me. And that you basically, when you put money on the bank, you lend it out to the bank, and the bank just has a big pile of money. They try to make more of it, right? And if they make a profit of it, you never see that. Maybe you have a little percentage on your savings account, but that's disproportionately lower than what they actually make, their margins. Well, when they lose money, like you saw in 2008, the losses get socialized. So even if you think you have like a bank insurance, bank deposit insurance covered by the government, once you realize that the government only gets money from its citizens, that's their income. Eventually, it all falls back on the citizens. And so we had that conversation, and I remember walking away from that just feeling like an idiot, like being like 30 years old, having a mortgage, working at a bank, and just realizing that I had no clue about money. And I think that conversation was actually my biggest trigger to kind of like go more towards, the financial and economical angles of Bitcoin, and really diving deep on that to eventually also understand what is the reason of existence of Bitcoin, right? Like why should it exist in the world? And I think it was great because like my startup background, where so over time in my career I worked with a lot of like early stage startups and entrepreneurs. I think like over 200 or something, in like these early stages of their ideas, and like all the ideas are technical solutions that exist in the future, right? And I always ask them, okay, but what are you going to do tomorrow? Like, how are you going to figure out and gather information that helps you determine if you should actually pursue this idea, right? So what's the reason of existence? Like, is there enough argumentation that you can gather based in, facts that can help you lower the uncertainty of your idea and actually give you the proof that you need to spend more time, energy, and resources on it? And so I started approaching Bitcoin like that. And so after that conversation, I just realized, okay, I don't know what money is. I don't know how finance works. I don't know what fractional reserve banking is. And I have a mortgage and I work at a bank. Like it's just, I just really felt stupid. And so that's when I really started going like down that path. And I think that's what really turned me into a Bitcoin maxi, I'd say, just realizing that there is a huge reason of existence for Bitcoin. And
at that point, did that completely switch you off all of the other crypto then?
Yeah. So, well, so I think I stuck with like Bitcoin and Ethereum. I didn't even play with like other cryptos, but then thinking like 2020, 2021, there was like the whole NFT craze. And I just remembered like, okay, this is ICOs all over again, but just a little bit different, right? Like ICOs had a business plan, which was multiple pages, right? And so that also kind of felt like, okay, I'm funding like new startups or something like that. Whereas with NFTs, they also called it a white paper, but it was literally like one paper, right? So and now you have meme coins, they have zero paper, right? So it's funny how it's degrading over time. But I saw that, and I think like one of the first NFT projects I got in, I made some money, and I was like, okay, I know this degenerate stuff. So I did get distracted by that, but along the way,
to try and get more sats.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so eventually get more Bitcoin. I think I was smarter than in the ICO age, right? So I felt like, okay, no, the goal is to get more Bitcoin. So that's what I tried, and then it actually eventually took me an attempt at a building a crypto startup myself that actually made me a full-on Bitcoin maxi, because it was like a market research startup for Web3. And so because I thought, okay, a lot of people are going to build something in crypto. They need to talk to early users, just as in Web 2.0 with startups, right? No one is doing that in Web 2.0. So my assumption is no one is really doing that in Web 3. But all the users in crypto in Web3 are by definition early adopters. So I thought, okay, if I can make a platform where I connect these users with new startups, like a bounty type platform where these startups could put on like assignments and say like, hey, this is my beta app, can you do these 5 or 6 or 10 actions, and then fill out this feedback form, and you can earn like 10 or 20 or 50 USDC or something like that. And so that was the idea. And I worked on that for 6 months with a friend of mine, and I talked to over 150 or so founders and teams, and no one really knew what they were doing. And I was schooling many people along the way about like customer research. And at one point I talked to a guy where I basically broke his whole idea, and he was like, I don't really care. I got 5 million from some fucking crypto VC, and I'm going to build this thing. And then I just realized, okay, crypto, there is like, I'm following this for 8 years now, right? The crypto part from Ethereum going live. And there's some like bridge places like Sushi Swap and stuff like that. I mean, that has value because people, they use that to bridge between blockchains and stuff like that, and switch tokens. Like there's obviously some sort of value there, and so they can earn money. But I haven't seen anything else. Maybe Polymarket now, right? I do like Polymarket, where you have like freedom of capital and freedom of information coming together, which makes a lot of sense. But that's, to be honest, like the first real product that has proven itself with user value, especially with the latest American elections. And for the rest, like there's nothing. Like there's nothing interesting in crypto, in my opinion. And it's just all a big grift. It's like VC 2.0. It's the same blob of money trying to catch like the next thing. And I think shutting down that attempt at that startup actually taught me that I really should focus on Bitcoin only. And so
and it's hard,
that's
isn't
what
it?
I'm
Because
doing.
a lot of those startups have big budgets and marketing teams and vested interests, and that's easier to spin a tale and tell a story than Bitcoin that has no CEO, has no marketing team, just a whole load of passionate people who understand what Bitcoin is and talk about it. It's hard sometimes for that to compete with cold hard cash for some people, isn't it?
100%. I mean, I think crypto is like a Faustian bargain. You know, Bitcoin sounds too good to be true. And it is if you don't study it enough, right? Like Bitcoin in essence is very dumb. Like what it does is very dumb. It's very simple. It's just, this is a protocol for money. These are its rules. And every 10 minutes, I will show you that I still adhere by these rules. And because the rules stay the same, it actually is a predictable system that grows in security and in information. And that is the value that it gives people. It's economic stability. It's the only economic constant in the world. But, that sounds crazy if you haven't studied it enough. But, that is the value. It gives you certainty towards the future. Why it's so dumb is just because it's a set of protocol rules, computer code, that just gets verified every 10 minutes. And the fact that it stays the same is the whole point. And so when you hear about like some new cool crypto that has like 1,000,000 trillion gazillion transactions per second, and you have this layer and that layer and zero knowledge shippity bub and something feature, that sounds way more interesting if you're a geek and a technologist and a computer nerd or whatever like me. But eventually that I now see as like a distraction. It's just an opportunistic Wild West, and that's okay. Maybe some stuff will eventually come out of it in a certain way, but I think after 8 years, Bitcoin is the only thing to focus on, basically.
It's funny sometimes when I talk to people about Bitcoin that know a little bit, or they start asking questions and saying, well, what's to stop someone else from launching something better? And I said, well, you can, the code is there. You could create your own Bitcoin tomorrow.
Yeah. And that's not what it's about. And that's the trap of crypto. That's the trap of crypto, right? Like now you have Pump.fun where people can just create a token. I think there are like 36 million altcoin or crypto type tokens now, and every month 1 million new tokens are added. And so it's not about the fact that you can create one. So that's not an argument. The fact is, can you recreate the one that introduced absolute digital scarcity? And that answer is no. Like you can only invent that once, and that's not even the innovation, that's the discovery. That's something that has never ever existed before, and that is also incomparable to any other attempt for a cryptocurrency, because that absolute digital scarcity and like growing value and structure and information in the network that self audits every 10 minutes, that is where the token Bitcoin derives its value from. And in crypto, they are like startups or foundations or organizations, whatever, and they say, I am going to build a network with information or a platform or whatever, where this token that I have is going to be used later on, and then it's going to have value. So that's why you should buy it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's totally the other way around. But they cannot create that platform or that system if they align their incentives in the beginning.
Even if they took the code though and tried to just make Bitcoin 2.0 using.
But we can do that now.
Yeah, you can do that, but you're not going to get this level of the hash rate and the global network of nodes and users that Bitcoin has got. That who's going to switch over? To sort of non-Bitcoin friends, I'll kind of use the analogy like you could start your own Facebook tomorrow, but how are you going to persuade millions of people all over the world to stop using Facebook and use your version of Facebook? Maybe that's not the best analogy, but it's, the point is...
you can do it, but who wants to interact on your social network? Like,
yes.
Why would I do that, right? And I think that is very old. The network effect is very old, and people don't understand that, right? So even if many people hate Twitter and start Blue Sky, Blue Cry, or Mastodon, or all that stuff, some people will, switch over. but there is a critical mass that has to exist, which is different per concept of platform, right?
Yeah.
So however many people that critical mass is, that's very, very hard to tell, but that's just not going to happen.
No.
So, and that's just that is basically it. So why would some crypto token be better than Bitcoin if the only thing that they can do to show they're better, or say rather, is to do some sort of marketing thing? So if you cannot win on the characteristics that eventually lead up to this absolute digital scarcity that you can only invent once, then yes, you are not the new Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. So your podcast is called Bitcoin for Millennials. Why focus on millennials?
I think it's two or threefold. I think one is I had conversations with several friends about money. I have some friends that sold their company, for example. They worked on a company for like 6-7 years, and they sold it and they got a reward, and now that's all in the bank. When I talked to them and said like, okay, so you spent like 7 years of your life and now you got now you got a reward for it. Someone paid you a certain reward for it, right? Basically like a multiplier on on the time and energy you put in, and then you gave it all away. What will happen if you call the bank tomorrow and say like, oh, I want to take out 200K? You're going to get some random guy on the phone that says like, oh, wait, look, I'm not going to look on my paper. Oh, that's higher than the threshold. Wait, oh, yeah, I'm going to follow my little decision tree here. Oh, my first question is like, oh, what are you going to use it for? And I had these conversations. So I asked my friends, like, okay, if you have that conversation, like, what do you think about this? And they all replied like, oh, yeah, that's just a little nuisance. Like, that's probably how it works or something like that. And, like it infuriates me, so I try to like explain to them that they are not in control. They were in control of their time and energy that they put in, and they are not in control of the reward that they got for it, right? Like, it's not their property. They don't have direct access to it. You need permission from some random person that works at a bank that follows a protocol that they didn't even design. Maybe the person that designed it doesn't even know why they are designing it, right? So it's like a multi-layer that actually eventually ends up in that conversation and that protocol or whatever the process is that they follow. And I tried to explain to that, and they were like, oh yeah, I just think how that it works like that. They were fine with it. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, how am I more concerned about your wealth than you are? There's something wrong. And so that's when I started thinking like, okay, but what do I know that actually could help them? And having these conversations also with them also showed me that there's a certain way to approach this, because I know I'm very far ahead in my knowledge now after like 10 plus years of studying that, I cannot just drop the inflation is theft. I cannot do that. Yeah, like trying to get to a certain conversation that clicks for a certain person is very hard. Like, what is the point where they go like, huh, yeah, that's weird, right? And I mean, I tried that in different ways, like the fact, the example that I just gave, like, okay, so that money in the bank is factually not yours. Like, how dumb is that? What a waste of 7 years of time and energy to give that to someone else, basically, that control. I think that's very bad, but for some people it still doesn't click when I say that, right? But that is my problem if I love them and I want to help them. So, and I think like in that same time period, I also had like different calls with Bitcoiners, people I knew like from the internet, just chatting like this, where there were a few conversations where I was like, damn, like I should have recorded this and then just like put it on Twitter or something. And I think this could be valuable, just us talking about why we think Bitcoin is valuable for us and where it's going, etc. And again, like I also in that time period, I just realized, Bitcoin is the only thing to pay attention to. I heard Bob Burnett, who is Boomer BTC on Twitter. I heard him on a podcast say like, okay, Bitcoin is the most important thing that you could spend your time on in your life. And then I just realized like, yeah, I'm going to think about this for the rest of my life. So why not do that? And so that all kind of like culminated in, okay, let's start another podcast and then I thought, okay, but I need to niche down. And then I thought about these conversations and the fact that, millennials are now in an age range where they are starting to inherit a lot of wealth. They are in an age range where they're taking big decisions about where to live, build a family, get married, maybe certain career steps, etc. So, being between 30 and 40 now is, a very important part in your life. Yeah, kind of like combining that with just seeing that no one understood money, seeing that we're going to inherit most of the, it's the biggest wealth transfer to ever exist from, these older generations to the millennials, and they have no clue what money is. That combined with, understanding of debasement of money and kind of all these things together, realizing that there is no retirement for us. I think that's one of the biggest ones, actually, that made me just like pick millennials as a niche, thinking, okay, just practical, like, okay, I should have a niche, but it should be big enough. But this is over 1 billion people, so that should be enough.
You must be doing really bad marketing then, because I'm Gen X and I still listen.
Oh yeah, I have boomers in my YouTube. Yeah, but I think it's great right now. Of course, Bitcoin is for everyone, but it's more like the angle of, okay, you need to think about your financial future as a millennial now, right? And so if you've been struggling, if you've been struggling while you're doing everything that's been told to you that you should do, then there is something wrong. That's not you, right? That's outside of you. And I've come to the realization that is the money. And yeah, once you see that, that's a big pill to swallow, right? Like, okay, I'm doing all this stuff, I'm spending all this time, and I'm
going backwards. I've done what I've been told. I've got my degree. I've started my career. I've had a promotion.
Yeah, whatever.
I've got married. We've had kids, and I've got.
Well, and not even. Do you know how many people don't want to have kids?
Yeah.
Because they are very like uncertain about the future, very nihilistic, very pessimistic, right? Like, and they are like, oh no, I cannot afford it, and stuff like that. And man, that's I think the biggest pity. That's just horrible. The fact that I kind of say it like this. Maybe it's blunt, but then I'll say I'm Dutch. The fact that your biological urge, natural biological urge, is blocked by something that's invented by other people, right? Debasing money that's becoming worth less over time, that actually heightens your uncertainty towards the future, and therefore blocks your decision or your biological urge to procreate. Like, what the hell, man? I think that's just so bad. And it took me some examples that I read about, but also at one point I talked to a guy that I thought that I knew, that was very intelligent, that actually told me exactly this, that he didn't want to have kids because he was very uncertain about the future. What world am I bringing this child in? And it's all these things. And then I thought, like, damn, like, this is a real thing, man. Like, this is a happy guy. He has money, I think. He has a great girlfriend, great parents, like, great support. Like, why, like a long-term girlfriend. I was like, why not? And he really shared with me, yeah, it's about money. And then I felt like, well, what the fuck? That's just wild. That's so crazy.
Well, and the most scary thing as well around that is that most economies are in massive deficit, and
well, you need children.
Today, yeah, exactly. You need, the whole system is predicated on future generations bailing out what the current people are spending, because how else, who's going to be paying for their pensions in 20 years' time?
That's why I'm saying there is no pension for millennials.
Yeah. Yeah, unless you look after yourself.
Exactly. That's what really got under me. Like, you have to do that, because once you understand that there's a certain path, which is lower value of the money that you're forced to use, and that there's a path dependency, like that will happen. It's like mathematically assured. And it has also happened in the past multiple times, right? Like, this time is no different in that sense. Then, that is what you have to decide for yourself. But I do have to say, like, it's really hard, especially if you like live in the Western world, because, and maybe that ties back to your first question, like, what is money? Like, I never had to think about money. Even when I was younger, maybe I got some coins and a bill, and I went to a store and I said, like, oh, I want a cookie or an ice cream or whatever. And then I just gave some coins and some bills, and then was like, okay, apparently this is money, right? It always worked for us, especially, by the way, for millennials who grew up in the best time to ever grow up for any person that ever lived. And so I do understand that it's very hard to even come to the conclusion that the money that you're being forced to use is broken and loses its value over time, and that it actually affects your life and your decisions and your future outlook and all these things, right? And I mean, that's not a nice thing to realize, but that is, I think, once you get over that, I think this is also why it makes, I think this journey, it makes it kind of like spiritual for me, is that once you can swallow that, that's actually when the door opens, right? And you can be like, okay, I'm going to accept this. Like, I had no clue. I'm a subject in this financial system. I'm doing all these things and I'm not getting ahead. And I know it's not me and it's an outside, okay, I have two choices. I either stay a subject or I do something about it. Like, there is no, that's very binary, right? And it's easy to, like in the Matrix movie, right, to keep eating the steak. You know, there's this guy who knows about the Matrix, but he says, no, I'm just going to stay because I love the steak. I know it's fake, but I love it, something. And he says something like that. Yeah, or you take the red pill in the movie and you basically start figuring out, okay, what am I actually, what am I in? What's this paradigm? How does this work? And how can I do something that actually gives me a bit more agency, or how do I take agency within this paradigm that actually gives me a bit more power over what happens to me, control power, something like that.
Yeah. So outside of money and Bitcoin, what's the best piece of advice you'd give to a millennial then?
Just be curious.
Yeah.
Just be curious. And take agency. I think it's that. I do think, I don't know, like I call this the Disneyfication of society or something, like just thinking that all the feudal stuff and all the like elite ruling by like kings in the past, right, where you had like peasants and kings and there was like elite and these people that conspired with each other and held the peasants under, that like we think that is all in the past, right? But I've never come to any piece of information that actually showed me that at some point we stopped with all of that stuff, right? And so if you accept that you are probably a peasant, in that sense, when you think about the Disney movie, like you're the peasant, you're like there are people that rule parts of the world and they are not the moral person that you think they are, because you think of yourself that you would never be a corrupt person if you would be in that position. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You can't assume they have your best interests at heart, because
just because you love yourself, right? And your own life, like you, and so that's a very naive thing to think. And like, you don't have to go down like, oh, I'm a conspiracy theorist or whatever. Just realize that is the case. Like, there are people that rule over you that care more about their own individual lives and careers than over your individual life. And that is just a fact. So what is one of the things where there's a certain elite that rules over something that controls your life? That's money. So once I realized that there's like a money system that I'm a subject in, that I cannot control, that I cannot verify, and that I understood to be not in my beneficial interest, my personal life experience interest, and that I could move whatever the economic wealth or energy, however you want to define it, that I gathered into a system that I can verify for myself 100%, that I can verify still like how it works, right? I can download the open source computer code. I can verify that for myself. I can run a node. I can verify the ledger, the integrity of this permissionless blockchain. And I can own the token, let's call it a token, that is used in this network. I can fully own that and nobody knows if I even have it or not. I can take it anywhere. I can trade it with anyone from anywhere at any time. And once I understood that, I just moved. So I don't see it as like investing in Bitcoin. I see it as it's a superior savings technology. It's saving in Bitcoin, and you're basically moving to another money. You're exchanging one money for another money. So I see the Bitcoin price as an exchange rate, and that's part of the question, or part of the answer to your question. That's where you end up, but you have to be curious and open, and just be okay with being wrong, and just realizing that you probably have no clue in what type of financial system you are operating in, and that's totally okay. Because I didn't know that either before. And I think you didn't know that before as well. And you also learned that along the way.
Yeah,
and you can only do that when you're curious enough and are just okay with being wrong.
Yeah, and I wonder how long it will be. Yeah, at the moment, a lot of banks make it hard for you to make that exchange between fiat and Bitcoin. I wonder, when do you think it will be the point where you won't be able to use fiat to buy Bitcoin? Because why would anyone want to sell? Why would anyone want to exchange?
Well, I
They can
mean,
go in theory.
even you saying this, right? So, okay, if you say, I want to spend my money on something that I researched, yeah, and there's some random person on the phone that says, no, sorry, we're not going to do that. That's your signal. That's a huge ass signal. You know,
Absolutely.
that's a crossroad moment. You can be like, okay, well, thank you very much and bye bye, or you could be like, what the hell?
Yeah, yeah.
What is this? Right? You asked a different question, but I think where we'll go. Yeah. So eventually, you know, Bitcoin is for anyone, but it won't be for everyone. So not everyone is going to get this. This is the opportunity that you have right now, is to, you know, if you're listening to this and you think like, oh, okay, this is sort of interesting, I think we both invite you, if you're listening, to do your own research. You don't have to believe us. The whole beauty of this is that you can actually do your own research and get to a point where you can understand this digital technology for money. You can verify it for yourself, and then you can start moving towards it. And you have that opportunity still now. There will be a point in the future where you will have to really, really work for it in order to get it, because then there won't be that much for sale, and will be at a very, very high exchange rate with the dollar or the pound or the euro. And well, to be honest, I think even if Bitcoin is $1 million per Bitcoin, there will still be people that fade this, that think it's nothing. And I mean, today we saw Bitcoin is the number 5 or 6 most valuable asset in the world, above silver, right? There's more value, there's more economic energy locked and stored into Bitcoin than in silver. And so if you grew up with the understanding that, you know, you should have gold and silver because that, retains its value, it's now gold, Bitcoin, and silver.
Yeah.
And that's another signal, like that is happening. It is happening. Okay. And that is basically it. Like if people listen to this and think like, oh, that sounds interesting, or like it's actually happening. Like that's the whole point. Like it's happening now. So there's like a certain rush that you should experience to study Bitcoin.
So many people are too accepting of the world and the systems around them. So anything that is new is just very difficult and challenging to embrace. But
that's always been the case.
Yeah.
With new stuff.
Yeah. And it was no different, you know, when emails came out, people thought, who's going to send emails? People like to receive letters. Now, you know, who would send a letter now when you can send an email or a WhatsApp, or, you know, it's no different. It's just, you know, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it rhymes. And Bitcoin is the technology that is going to replace money. People just can't see it yet.
It's no different than before. There's a very famous piece from a documentary in my country where a guy did like street interviews, and he asked them in like 1990, well, maybe 2001 or 1999 or something like that. He asked him like, would you want to have a mobile phone? And all these people are like, mobile phone? No, fuck that. Like, I don't want to be disturbed all the time. It's funny, that's how people feel right now, right? Like currently when people call it. But they were like, no, I don't want to be disturbed all the time. I have an answering machine at home. Like you can reach me when I want to be reached, you know, like that. And everyone said that. No one was like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. You know, and these were just everyday normal people like us that were interviewed. And I think it's like 30 people in that clip. And they all say like, no, I would never, ever, ever, ever want a mobile phone. And so that's nothing new. Right, like people who were against bicycles, people were against cars, people were against the printing, like people were against electricity.
Yeah.
They thought electricity was more dangerous than fire in your home, right? So with candles. So I mean, that's from all ages. As long as even if you feel like you are that person, if you realize that that's always the case, just like change your mind. You just think about like, I don't want to be that person. I am not that person, because it is going to happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Well, I need to be respectful of your time because you've got family responsibilities. So the last question I ask all my guests is, what's one belief you held before Bitcoin that you've completely changed your mind about?
Ooh, I like that. It's interesting because I ask all my guests, right? Like, what's a core belief you will never let go? And it's funny because I think mine is something like be curious or something like that. But I don't really think I really hold on to certain beliefs. I've come to realize that I'm actually pretty flexible and that I'm okay to like change what I believe in. I actually have a friend now that tells me you shouldn't use the word believe, you should use the word probable and say like, okay, with my understanding of this right now, I think this or this or this is the most probable. And I've come to realize that that is actually how I think. So I don't think I had any that actually changed. I think I gained some things that I think are good to adhere to for yourself personally, or like use to operate in your life. And yeah, then again, I think the curious part is a big one. But also, yeah, just really understand that you will never understand everything. And as someone who would previously called himself quite a control freak, I think that was a big revelation for me, that I'm actually okay with that. And there's actually something fun in that and rewarding in that. Like staying, like having that beginner's mindset, being okay to be wrong and just living life like that. Because it actually makes it a bit more easy. Like if you get confronted with something that you actually have to make a decision about, like, right, like a certain realization that you have to make a decision about, you don't have like all previous baggage. I kind of like view it as like, okay, this is this decision in the moment, and I make a decision and I go right. And then I actually, yeah, just close off that decision I made. So I'm not really someone who is like disappointed with previous decisions, because I just feel like, okay, like in a certain moment in time, I took a decision. I was like very diligent in making that decision. And then like, yeah, if it's the wrong decision, I cannot look back and be like, oh yeah, you were stupid, because that's not true, because I actually did the work in that moment. And so I think I turned that around because I was different when I was younger. I think I turned that around into just like an opportunity to learn, right? Like, okay, if I'm honest with myself and I know I made the right decision and I went, right, and it ended up being a wrong decision, I'm okay with that, as long as I learned something so that helps me be even more diligent in making the next decision, right? So that's kind of, I think, what changed.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the risk is if you overthink things too much, you don't turn left or right or go forwards. You just stand where you are.
No, that's very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very true. Yeah. Nice.
Okay, brilliant. Well, I appreciate you being on so much. It's been great meeting you and talking to you, Bram. So thanks so much for your time.
Likewise, man. Thanks so much. Cheers.